times it's a wonderful word, but it's kind of a mysterious word, because how do you build communities around these things? I'm curious, I mean, do you feel like you figured that out? Is it still a big challenge to get people, makers, plugged into what you're doing?
Yeah, it's definitely a huge challenge, and it's the challenge that we're trying to overcome every day. But there's a common social theory or something like that, is you need like one innovator, and then you need like two people like behind him going, oh, that's a cool idea. And then like what happens is you get a movement of people that come and join around those people, like the early adopters. And so by focusing on several people that we realized were like the innovators and the like self-driven, motivated people, what happened is like 3 or 4 of their friends would come, and then they'd be like, oh, this is really cool, and then we'd promote their ideas and their work just among their friends and say, oh, did you see what he's doing? Did you see what, oh, this is cool. And then it kind of like slowly ballooned outside of that, and it's kind of project specific is what we're finding, is that we have, so we set up in Tribhuvan University, which is the largest and oldest university in the country, public university. We're in the mechanical engineering department, which is actually the biggest makerspace in the country. And it's actually getting the first plasma CNC that country has ever seen. So we're really, really pumped to see this all happening. But yeah, so we have a group of architects are also there. We have mechanical engineers. We have automotive engineers. And so by selecting the kind of innovators and the people that are on the forefront, the kind of popular nerds at the university, we were able to kind of build communities around them that kind of have slowly grown outwards themselves. Yeah.
I have a problem when I go into the county jails, is that we are dealing with individuals who have very low self-esteem. I mean, throughout high school, and some in cases in junior high and elementary school, all they've been taught is that they're never going to be more than anything than they already are. And consequently, society has validated that by them being inside of the county jail. But the biggest challenge that I find is that I usually remind them, and I'm done this dirt from Texas. I mean, I was sitting in Texas, I had to be 4 times smarter than the smartest young African-American man to even be able to sit here on this stage and have the kind of conversation with these incredible people that I'm having. But yet, here I am in a county jail somewhere in the Bay Area, and you're less than an hour and a half away from Google, LinkedIn, Microsoft, companies that I've rarely even thought about down in Austin or San Antonio. And the high schools that you graduated from, and I'm talking as if I'm talking to one of the inmates in the prison, the high schools that you graduated from are leap years better than the ones that I've had to at least try 4 to 5 times to be best at, to be where I'm at today. So we have a disconnect problem. We have a reality that we have to teach individuals inside the jail that their self-esteem has got to change. You can do this. You are as smart as the next individual. And by the way, I fought my life to get to Silicon Valley because I know you guys are smart out here. And why am I sitting in a county jail holding a high school class in C+ computer engineering? I don't know. But the fact is that we're going to do it. We're going to make it happen. So to your point of community, I have to form a community out of nothing, and that's what makes me so excited to be a maker, because I'm able to grow in and create something that was not there before and make it valuable enough for someone to enjoy it. And what is the enjoyment from the maker community? $106,854.37 is how much you're saving from every individual that does not go back to county jail. The rate in the Bay Area is almost 70%. It's 68% on 35-year-old African and Hispanic males in the Bay Area. That's it. 68% failure rate, and you're failing at $100,000 a year. You can build a community off of 20.
Yeah, good points. So for us, I would just say it's similar. I mean, what is a community? It's someone leading and people seeing that and being like, oh, I can be a part of that. That's something I want to be a part of. So that openness, that welcome, also that it's impactful to individuals' lives. People seeing that if I'm part of this, there's a value. Something new I can add to this is at the very foundation, I think it's trust, that there is a real relationship, that there's trust between these different parties or persons who are engaging in whatever they've come together to do. That, I think, creates the strongest foundation to be able to then work together remotely or locally. So that's what I would say.
So kind of going off of community, I think that a big buzzword these days is kind of building communities of resilience, which, you know, from my perspective is that on a long enough timeline, every single community will have a disaster of some sort hit it. And it doesn't matter if it's a natural disaster, it could be an economic disaster, it could be even something more systemic, like a social disaster. And from my perspective, a lot of that has to do about, it's hard because you have to get in front of that, right? And you actually have to like be teaching the teachers. So, I mean, would you say that for you guys, education is a large part of what you do? And how do you go about educating people? How do you get people excited about the work that you're doing?
Well, I can talk about what we do at Field Ready, which is part of Humanitarian Makers, or vice versa. And anyway, yes, education is a huge component. And it's mutual. I mean, we're out designing items, finding local manufacturers, talking to the humanitarian organizations, and in that process, there's learning and there's identification of skill gaps, and saying, okay, well, we can train on those areas, or we can work with educational providers to support that knowledge. But it's long-term education, I guess, in the context of saying, how do we make this ecosystem be able to be leveraged in terms of disaster? It takes building this up and bringing not only the opportunity and the connections there, but also the skills over time to be able to be leveraged in those situations.
For me, education is everything. And it's not just the book learning that we're talking about. I can teach you how to connect to a network, no problem. I can even teach you what a packet is. But the education for us is what I mentioned just a little while ago. I face two critical enemies every day, and I'm constantly asking for support and community. And by the way, our program operates off of a performance-based model, so that we are written into our corporate structure that we will never take a grant and we will never take a donation. Rather, we will earn our right through the process. So it requires a certain amount of getting in front of individuals. And part of the process that I find challenges in education is I face two enemies: apathy and ignorance. Ignorance, I can teach you out of. Apathy, I have to work myself around. And those are the two biggest education points that I have to overcome every time, whether or not I'm putting my own money into a program, which I have been known to do, or I'm taking some of Cisco's money and putting it into a program, or I'm taking a city's money and putting it into it. It's always about the education. One, teaching the individual that they are as good as the next person. I'm just as good as any one of these makers up here, even though I'm not at an international level, but I feel just as confident that I can go out and do just as good as anyone else. And when you get that educational mindset in the spirit of the person, they're not afraid to pick up a 3D printer, they're not afraid to pick up a drill, they're not afraid to do something that is significantly going to impact not only themselves, but the community as well. So that passion starts with education.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. Like giving the independence, like saying, hey, we're going to equip you with knowledge and then give them the fire and the ability to kind of teach themselves and say, hey, look, I can learn coding, it's not a big deal, or I can learn anything. Like if you give a person that, you've given them complete freedom to choose their future, which I think is just really powerful. As far as education, it is a huge part of what we do. We're working at a university, so obviously education is a big part of what we do. But we also teach code in rural villages, and so we take computers out. And the last time we did a small little class, it was kind of a pilot project for one of our educational curriculums. And it was, we just took 5 computers out to a village that we had to hike 36 hours just to get to. So they dropped us off at the road, and then we hiked through the Himalayas up into this earth-prone or earthquake-destroyed village. And we gave them a bunch of computers, and we sat them down. They were 17 years old to 19 years old, and there's 5 of them. 3 of them had never seen a computer before, and 2 of them had never, and all of them, none of them had ever touched one. They had never actually physically seen one in real person. And so it was really cool. Within 2 days, we actually had them building WordPress websites and using Photoshop to build their own websites in a matter of 2 days. And so education, I mean, they didn't have the skills, like they could go back and follow our guide and click the buttons and make the things happen, but they didn't have the skills to kind of go out and learn and teach themselves more about the process of WordPress. I mean, first we brought internet access, so there's a whole lot of things, like they're just unconnected and that sort of thing, but and we haven't fully overcome some of those challenges, because it's also, you know, if you're only making, you know, $75 a month, and you know your priority is harvesting your rice, and you have a whole culture that computers have never been a part of, getting them to be prioritized and making learning a priority through computers is a real challenge. So we started working with the local school districts and kind of working with their English teachers, because as you know, the internet is primarily in English. And so in rural villages, it's also a really challenge, because you can give them a computer, you can give them the internet, you can give them access to every piece of information human beings have kind of put on the internet, which is a lot. And, but it doesn't really matter unless you have English. So we started working with the English teachers and kind of training them so that they can go out. But training, you know, a 40-year-old is much harder than training a 15-year-old. And then there's all of these real challenges that we face, where it's like, hey, we're a foreigner, and they look at us like we have a whole lot of money. So the English teachers and stuff, they don't approach our education curriculum authentically, and they look at it more like as a roads to maybe find more funding later, or those sorts of things. And we don't blame them. We try to connect them with additional sources, but education is the key, I think, for long-term economic development for
So a word that you said in what you were just saying was challenge. You know, and I think that challenge are sometimes good to put out there, because I have no idea who's in the audience here. You know, maybe they have a solution to one of your problems. In furthering your work, what is the biggest challenge that you're coming up against right now? I'll start with you, Johnny, if you know.
Thank you. The biggest challenge that I have is really going back to what we've been saying, education. The fact that I'm sitting here right now speaking to a number of souls that have listening ears, that have an understanding mind, and a willingness and a participation to engage in a community that shows itself to be inclusive. I mean, the mere fact that I'm on stage is a statement of our inclusiveness in the maker community in and of itself. The fact that we're having this conversation about solidifies the fact that we're really focused on something much larger than ourselves. So if I needed some help in this area, it would be people realizing that you have to give of yourself to get the type of results that we're going to want. If we want a bigger, broader, open, inclusive group of people, then we're going to have to be the ones to pick up the hammer and the nail and go out and make the wall happen. Forgive me for the wall. You don't like that wall story. But the fact is anyone can help. A case in point, go to my website, CityLab.pro. I go to my second website, Maximum Balance Foundation. Sign up, ask me when am I going to one of the county jails. You would be surprised. Forgive me for elaborating here, but there is a program called the Last Mile Program. It's run by a friend of mine who happens to be a venture capitalist, and it is ran out of several of the state jails. Now realize we're only at, I'm in grade school. I'm working with county jail inmates and individuals who are pre-emancipation coming out of foster care. There's still the state and there's still the federal, so there are huge amounts of things going on. Chris Redlitz, for instance, in the Last Mile program, has taught the inmates how to code. They run the website Cura. They also are getting paid somewhere in the range of about $9 or $10 an hour versus 25 or 50 cents what their peers are being paid in the same environment. So there's a lot of things going on at the organic level of this, but where can you help me? You can start reaching out where your makerspaces are, wherever they are, wherever they may be. Realize that if you look around and you don't see Hispanic girls or boys or black boys or girls, it's time for you to start talking to your executive manager and going inside of the jails, going inside of the community centers, going inside of the foster care place. I cannot be everywhere, right? But you can. Individually, each one can reach enough individuals to bring this community together and make it even more richer than it already is. And I'll say this, in the terms of the political aspect, think about this. There was a gentleman who grew up in Canada. He was an African male. He actually migrated to the United States and became an African American male. He actually ended up changing the transportation system of the entire United States of America. His name was Eloy McCoy, the real McCoy, the steam engine, yes, that was an immigrant African American, the later American male. So yes, we can, yes, we will, and yes, we should find a way to be more inclusive and going out and reaching, bringing people in as opposed to waiting for people to come in. Let's go out and get them and bring them into the community and make it what it needs to be. Educate, economic empowerment, and be inclusive and not so much as, don't look at me for what my skin color is, but judge me on what my mind says. Last little thing. I want to acknowledge my little buddy in the room because this is my baby son behind you guys. What's important about this and what's valuable about it on this stage is that when he met President Obama, 9 years ago, in 2007, it became a statement of mind. This is a young African-American man who does not have to be bound by the rules of Martin Luther King. I have a dream that one day I might be president. No. He has a dream that as long as he studies, he educates himself, he becomes familiar with communities, he's inclusive, he can actually be president one day. But what is the argument to the daddy? What is my job now? Let's step back and let's look at that. And what is the role that I play in society to make sure that people accept and are inclusive for women, for other ethnicities? What do we do? Well, here's what I do. I found 12 of my friends. We found a little vacant school in San Francisco on 17th and Diamond, and we built a school. And this year, the third graders connected a Raspberry Pi unit to the aquaponics garden that they had to grow herbs on, and they turned around and served us pizza from the whole operation. Third graders. So if we as makers can find a maker way to get out and do the very things that I've done, I'm not asking anybody to do anything that I can't do. I've done it. I've been in the jails. I've been in the elementary schools. Haven't been to Nepal yet, but plan to go. We can do these things because of who we are. And let's not forget who we are and how we educate and encourage individuals to become more like who we are. Because as soon as we do, we're going to become so much better as a society and being able to push the things forward that we need to do. And that's it.
How do I follow that? So there's two clear challenges that I can give you that I think you can bite on. One is this last fall we created a list of prototypes or items that have been designed in the field in response to needs identified by humanitarian responders. And now we're trying to see, okay, and we invited a bunch of groups and people to test them, to go online, find their open source, open hardware instructions, how to assemble them, how to create them, and see and give us feedback. Can they read the instructions? Does it make sense no matter what language they speak or where they are in the world or what their education background is? Can they actually get through them? Are we communicating correctly? And then can they make it? If they have the equipment, resources, and access to that, were they able to replicate what we had designed? And then thirdly, could they use it? From what they made, is it actually usable according to their expectations? So that is ongoing. Definitely it's a challenge for us to get the word out and get people to help with this testing. But the long-term vision is that as these different communities and how we pull these different communities together, they're doing different types of humanitarian making, that together we can identify what the strongest items are and make them available so that others can test and keep iterating and get them to a level where they're usable, whether for the global context or for their own customized use. So that's one. And then the second is saying, okay, now if I am in Syria and my life has been disrupted, but I have design engineering skills and I can see this problem and I can work on it, but I need to I don't have another source of income. So how do we create a new kind of economy or marketplace that allows us, wherever we live geographically, to actually engage in this kind of process and respond to our own needs, but economically also receive a return. So basically saying, how can we make livelihoods out of this? So that's maybe a little bit more abstract on that level, but tangibly help us test items. And then two, we want to figure out, well, how can people who contribute to this item development actually be rewarded, whether it's through education or payment or whatever.
Along with that, well, not obviously, one of our major challenges is obviously funding, especially the longer you get away from a disaster, the less funds are there, the less people want to really contribute financially and that sort of thing. And so back to your concept of creating businesses or collaborative groups or things like this to kind of fund projects that are directly tied to making things that are for humanitarian purposes seems like the really solid way to go. Like it's a dream that I've had for a while, and when the actual model comes out, I'm really looking forward to kind of rewarding people. I know for me personally, like since I've started this organization 3 years ago, I have so many people, like my friends are like, why, who are you and why did you start, how did you get into this? And I'm not special or anything like that. And I challenge all of you to kind of look at yourselves in the same way, like you can do anything, like the maker movement, and it's just a proof of this sort of thing. So I challenge you to actually get involved and pick something that you're passionate about and then use your skills to actually make an impact in somebody's life, because there's nothing better. I mean, I don't get paid, and I should, and I will hopefully someday. But I'm doing this because there's nothing better than like students coming up to me after, saying, hey, our business, we started our makerspace and we're profitable and we're running, and now there's all these people coming and using our makerspace. Like that is the kind of satisfaction I get out of that is worth it, and it makes life worth, and it takes me here. I was in Kathmandu last week, and now I'm sitting on a stage right here, and like it takes me all over the place doing all sorts of crazy things just because I enjoy, in a purely selfish way, the impact that I make in other people's lives. And I challenge you to go out and use the skills and reach out and look for challenges that need solved and really try to tackle them yourself. Like, don't let somebody else do it. Take responsibility. Sorry, that was
Well, what I love about what you were just showing there was passion, right? And a question that I kind of want to ask you, and this is probably from my own perspective of why I'm curious, is that when you're tackling big problems like this, and when you're confronting big problems, sometimes that's hard, It's not the easiest thing to do, and so sometimes what drives you is that passion. And so I'm curious, because I'm always tackling with this, is where does that passion come from, and how do you keep it alive? Do you have a secret to how you keep that energy burning, because it's not easy?
It definitely comes up and it comes and goes. And normally it's like at the start of a project, I'm sure it's like, oh, this is going to be awesome, and we're going to make a huge impact, and lives are going to be changed, and it's all this awesome stuff. And then, 5 months into the project, you're like, I don't know if this is going to work. And you like sit at home and eat ice cream and watch movies, and you're just like, I can't make any decisions, and I'm frozen. And all I got to say is that is going to come, and just ride that wave and know that it will end eventually. Just give it time. What I've found is that not forcing solutions onto things and letting the solutions come when I can't make decisions, and being okay with the waiting actually allows me to get through those dips and come out the other side, and because the solutions will come, and they do come.
one of the companies that I run is called Maximum Balance Foundation. And it's called that for a reason, maximum balance, having a solid foundation. And it's that passion. You hear the passion, the excitement coming across on stage, because I'm trying to convince a group of individuals that I'm not the only one in America that can actually sit up here and do this, like yourself. Anybody can do this. Anybody can get up off of their behind, go and get a volunteer's pass and go into a county jail with a Cisco A+ certification book, or with a 3D printing book, or with a epilogue book, or with a universal laser book, or any other book that you want to pick up and teach something to someone who doesn't know anything about what you do. I mean, it's just what we do. So that passion is there. You know, granted, the Maximum Balance Foundation oversees CityLab for that very reason, because nobody said anything about baby mama drama when I was going into the jail. Nobody said that I would have to come out and take care of where am I going to get my job, or how do I get to my job at 8 o'clock, even though I know that that's the most important thing to me. So passion rate is here when it comes time to engage and encourage individuals. And sometimes it's like, oh my God, that guy just was sent out of the jail. We just spent close to $15,000 on getting him educated, and they put him in a crack house, the very thing he went to county jail for, and who's, you know, and so that side of the passion hasn't come in, was when you call me crazy. So that's the number two. Number one is that you just have to have it. Number two is that I have challenges myself. If you tell me, like the sheriff of San Francisco said, there was a bunch of BS, and there's a YouTube video on this for those of you who want to go and see it. It's called Blackboard, Chalk, and Eraser. I told the city of San Francisco that we could actually reduce the rate of recidivism by at least 1% doing this. Turns out to be 100%, but nonetheless, the sheriff of San Francisco said, Johnny, that sounds like a bunch of BS. And I said, well, Ross, his name was Ross Mercarimi at the time. I said, Ross, I grew up in Texas. When I wake up in the morning and I take a deep breath, I know what BS smells like. So, sadly enough, because I was a little smart behind, he gave me a piece of chalk, a blackboard, and an eraser. And the agreement was that if any of the individuals in my class passed the A+ certification, that he would never impede me from coming inside the jail and teaching more classes. For 85% of the individuals got out in the 12-week period, the other 15% stayed behind, but 100% of the individuals were certified by Cisco through the test. Back to your point, there were individuals who came out that had never been on a computer in their life, that certified the same day as the test that we have the rest of the class that knew that had been on the computers. So passion. Passion comes from the inert need for me to do something to solve a problem. It comes from the second part of being challenged. There's someone calling me crazy. And then the third part is that just fact of matter, that's who I am. Call me crazy, call and say I can't do it, and you're probably gonna find somebody who's gonna leave Texas and end up on a stage in Silicon Valley. And it's just that simple.
Okay, I was hoping I would be able to pull up a photo quick, but if you remember that photo in the beginning of the woman with the stethoscope, at the end of the day, knowing that, these items, if they are usable and reliable, are impacting people's lives, is what keeps me going. I know that there's a lot of stuff in between that. But at the end of the day, if we even think about these microphones or everything that's around us, we're using it, and it's impacting our lives. And what if it's the critical or these humanitarian items when it's the most need exists? This came up. Wow, I don't know. I can see, but I guess there's the reality in knowing that when we have items that work, we're not just saving lives, but that whole process, that it's the people there, it's us, we're part of this community, we have the purpose, we have the challenge, mean, that's kind of like the cores of humanity that I think we're all talking about. So it's enriching personally, it's enriching other people's lives. And I hope someday in my own experience and people in the relationships that I've built, I know that if we're successful, there will be a more economic opportunity for people who are traditionally left out of that. So.
Well, I'm really thankful that this panel brought me here today because I got to meet all of you, and what you're doing is really inspiring in the world. And I'm just really thankful that there are people out there thinking about these big problems and iterating solutions. So I think the last question I'd ask is, if people want to follow what you're doing out in the world, how can people find you? How can people get a hold of you? How can people join the conversation?
You can visit our website. I guess it's the best way, or our Facebook, something like that. It's disasterhack.org. It needs updated a little bit. It's been a few months, but we've got a lot more stuff going on that's on there. So definitely check out there. You can come visit us in Nepal. If you've got some maker skills, and even if you don't have maker skills and you just want to get your hands dirty and come out and kind of meet a new culture and kind of interact with some really great people, I challenge you to come. I really desire you to come. Even just like sharing your experiences and your work setting and all that is just super, super valuable, and you have massive impact on a place like this just by going and having conversations. So I would say that. We also have a fundraising kind of enterprise going on at Burning Man this year, which sounds like totally antithetical, but it's a really cool project. And if you would like to get involved, you'd like to come out into the desert, we're making crazy art bikes and tall bikes and all sorts of really cool bikes, because we collected a whole bunch of littered bikes and we're turning them into a social enterprise and funding our work in disaster zones through the work at Burning Man. So just visit our website, disasterhack.org, or come up to me after this and I'd love to share more about what we're doing.
Visit my website, CityLab.pro, not .com, P-R-O. Maximum Balance Foundation, True to Texas is my handle on Twitter. Come up and see me at the end.
And humanitarianmakers.org, and we have this fine woman up here, Jessica, who has cards if you want to take one. So thank you.
Thank you all. And so if any of these stories inspired you today, I want to let you know that through the organization I work with, Burners Without Borders, right now we actually have our annual grant program open. And so we provide community grants and civic ignition starter grants to people who want to take these type of creative, collaborative skills out into the world and make social impact. And so if you'd like to get a micro grant from us, our application is open until June 4th, and we would love to see what you want to create in the world. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it was a panel of panel.
Almost an hour.